Hello, everyone. This is Chelsea Clary of Clemson University, and today we're going to be looking at some selected poems by Emily Dickinson. Dickinson is one of the canonical poets in the American tradition. She's widely read. She lived in New England in the 19th century, and there's a kind of popular myth that she was basically the town crazy lady who wore nothing but white, never left the attic, probably talked to birds. Well, she almost certainly talked to birds. She was a enthusiastic gardener, but she actually didn't live that strange of a life for a single woman of her era. So cast aside the crazy lady myth. This is Emily Dickinson we're looking at here. As you can see, she's not wearing white, and this is the famous picture of her, so I don't know how that myth developed. We're going to look at a couple of her poems that form a nice narrative arc. They show some of the characteristic Emily Dickinson traits, creative use of punctuation, which we can see even before we start reading these, the use of a bird to represent concepts, including sometimes herself, relatively short poems, as most of hers were. Many of them were originally written in letters. And you will also notice that her capitalization is a little unusual. These are lyrical poems, meaning that they're in first person, expressing the emotions of the speaker. That actually is a technical term. And they were written many years apart. You'll notice the numbering atop the poems. This indicates scholars' best guess at the chronological order in which they were written. Early in her life, she would actually bind them all into books, but many of the others were found in letters. Some of them with things crossed out because her family had a lot of editorial control over the publication of her poems, and there was some drama. It was a whole soap opera thing. So I'm going to read you these poems, and then at the last one, we're going to pause, and I'll go through some close reading of it with you. Now, normally, there's a couple of different ideas of how they should be numbered that are competing. So you don't want to refer to them by the number. Usually her poems are referred to with the first line in quotation marks. So let's begin with number 84. Her breast is fit for pearls. Her breast is fit for pearls, but I was not a diver. Her brow is fit for thrones, but I have not a crest. Her heart is fit for home. I, a sparrow, build there, sweet of twigs and twine, my perennial nest. Now, this poem is a really excellent example of how the gaze functions in literature. I should probably learn to pronounce that word at some point, considering. The gaze, G-A-Z-E. You will notice in the first stanza, 4 lines here, the focus of our speaker on her, our third person female object here, subject, is on visible things, her breast, her brow. So bodice and forehead. Her breast, her chest and throat, we're not just focusing on boobs here, is fit for pearls. She's someone who's worthy to wear a pearl necklace, but I can't get them for her because I'm not a diver. Her brow, her forehead, is fit for thrones. She should be a queen who wears a crown, but I haven't got one of those either. And then in the second stanza, we switch from the visible to the invisible, her heart, this metonymy for her love, her feelings. That's fit for home. I think this is a lovely romantic little poem in the way it moves from the physical to the ethereal, and the way it moves from these images of the speaker having skill or rank to just being a sparrow, this humble little creature. Notice that the gaze goes from this person as the object of the gaze is being visually appreciated to metaphorically appreciated, but they remain within the control of the speaker. The speaker is controlling where the camera is, to use a metaphor that would not have made sense at the time because cameras didn't move that much because they were bigger and heavier. And yet at the same time, this poem feels to me, and this is very much a subjective reading, like it moves from the gaze as fixing someone in place to the gaze as celebration. It's a very graceful little poem, and if you need something for Valentine's Day, this one never fails. Now, the rest of these I'm just going to read to you so that you can hear them spoken, and I'll let you follow the story until we get to the end, and then we'll stop again. Number 156. You love me, you are sure. I shall not fear mistake. I shall not cheated wake some grinning morn to find the sunrise left, and orchards unbereft, and Dolly gone. I need not start, you're sure. That night will never be, when frightened, home to thee I run, to find the windows dark, and no more Dolly, mark, quite none? Be sure you're sure, you know, I'll bear it better now, if you'll just tell me so, than when, a little dull bomb groan, over this pain of mine, you sting again. Next is number 249. And I'm going to warn you at this point, lots of people read this one as really raunchy. It's not the only way to read it, but people do. Wild nights, were I with thee, wild nights should be our luxury. Futile the winds to a heart in port, done with the compass, done with the chart. Rowing in Eden, ah, the sea, might I but moor tonight in thee. Number 941. Notice we've jumped a long way. The lady feeds her little bird at rarer intervals. The little bird would not dissent, but meekly recognize the gulf between the hand and her, and crumbless and afar, and fainting on her yellow knee, fall softly and adore. And lastly, number 1683. That she forgot me was the least. I felt its second pain, that I was worthy to forget what most I thought upon. Faithful was all that I could boast, but constancy became, to her, by her innominate, a something like a shame. So, the reason I want to stop on 1683 is you'll notice she has this very informal style where she uses the technique of enjambment, which is where you break concepts or sentences over a line. And she does not use it at all in this last one. This is a very formal poem, and the way the sentences are structured is very complex. To me, it seems like the sentences have started to obey the poetic structure instead of the poetic structure obeying the sentences. So, that she forgot me was the least. The fact that she doesn't think of me anymore is not important. It's the secondary issue. That I was worthy to forget what most I thought upon. I believe this means I was worthy to be forgotten by, and she's using an unusual structure of that word. So the fact that she could forget me was secondary to this other pain. And the second stanza is going to tell us what that pain is. Faithful was all that I could boast, but constancy, faith, loyalty, became to her, by her, innominate. So breaking that down, nominate, to name someone, innominate, something is not being named. So she is faithful to her, but her does not name or recognize that faith. Constancy became to her, by her, innominate, as something like a shame. So the most painful thing is that our speaker was loyal, even though the other person wasn't. So you're seeing a lot of the basic Dickinson style here. She wrote an awful lot of poems, at least 1683, as you can see, more than that. And they're mostly pretty short, so if you like her, she has written on practically every subject. You can go find more. Now, we cannot say that the author and the speaker are the same person. That is never a safe assumption. However, if we did make the assumption that I, a sparrow, I need not start, faithful was all that I could boast, if we assume that is Emily Dickinson, something very interesting enters here. It is often thought that the person addressed in each of these poems is this lady, Susan Gilbert. And I'm going to use their first names just for clarity here. Susan was married to Emily's brother. She was a math teacher, and they were very enthusiastic correspondents. And a lot of the poems were originally written in letters to Susan. Here's where the soap opera starts. We can't be sure how many of them explicitly addressed Susan by name, because eventually Emily's brother leaves his marriage to Susan, gets together with a different woman who also is a big fan of Emily's poetry. She's the one who does most of the editing of the work, along with the brother, who apparently did not want to suggest that his wife and his sister were having an affair, even though his second lady friend also seems to have been very interested in his sister, which I feel like that has to be a blow to someone's ego. So that's the underlying drama here. This is supported by the fact that we have records and letters where she calls Susan Dolly. So, have we got several poems written in character where the speaker is someone else who has this romance where there's the love, there's the anxiety about not having it returned, there's the passion, and then there's the slow dissolution of their romance? Is this a story? Is this Dickinson herself writing specifically to Susan? We can't know for certain, but finding evidence within the text in order to support a given theory is the work of literary interpretation. So, hope you enjoyed these. If you have questions, get in touch, and I will see you next week.